check. Okay. So, good evening, everybody. Let's start with the second part of the day. We have today Commander Eduardo Cavalieri from the Italian Firefighters. He is commander of the CBRN department for the region Lombardia. That is the largest region of Italy in terms of population. Just Lombardia has more than 10 million inhabitants, just to give you a perspective on how difficult it is to deal with CBRN with such a large amount of person. And Eduardo is also in charge of one of the coolest, in my opinion, mobile lab that we have in Italy. And he will talk also about that today. Eduardo, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
See you.
See you. Bye.
When you are about to finish, tell me what's up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, hi everybody. Nice to meet you. Yes, Sandra introduced me already. What I'm going to talk about today is the use of mobile laboratories in support of CBRN missions. As Andrea said, well, Lombardy region, yes, is the most populated, but maybe the real data that you want to know is that is the largest district in Europe, together with another district in Germany with series of plants, like chemical plants with high-risk plants. So that's why maybe it's relevant to have a CBR unit over there. So what we're going to talk about today is give you an overview of mobile laboratories, and then some design metrics, and then we will go through an example which is referring to the implementation of a new design that is that we are working right now in a European project, biological laboratory design. Anytime you have questions, just interrupt me. We can, chat about it. So first of all, I mean, point is, do we really have some guidelines for designing mobile laboratories? So having a mobile laboratory, obviously, we will see means trying to have the feature that you have in a fixed laboratory, in a permanent laboratory, but in a more compact space. And so there are some guidelines, but in effect, in my opinion, the standards are not so well defined. So this is good because right now the lab we are designing right now has some degree of freedom, but also we lack, at least in the, I'm talking about the civil field, we miss some proper guidelines. But here are some of the reference documents that you might go through if you want and you're interested, and we will talk about them later on. So what type of laboratories we can have? I'm obviously referring, given the field I work with, to mobile laboratory owned by the fire rescue services, but there could be fire rescue services in Italy, not just in Milan, but in where are you from? From Lazio? Okay, also in Lazio we have them. We have them in Venice, in Veneto. So we have a distribution of the CBRN capacity in our organization is everywhere, but the three focal points are Rome, Milan, and Venice. There are various reasons why these cities are developing CBRN more than others, but and so we have at least 3 laboratories as the one that is in red in the corner. But it's not just fire brigades owning mobile laboratories. It's something which is developing in the recent years. So if fire brigades should have mobile laboratories for every type of threat, like chemical, biological, radiological, there could be other entities owning laboratories. There could be labs for diagnostic, so sanitary field. There could be, well, here is still us, the fire prevention and inspection unit is our, we have chemical laboratories to understand if a fire were caused by accelerants, like if you were putting fuel, if someone made it on purpose or not. But then I don't know the environmental agency in Italy, but I'm obviously referring to Italy, but it would be also in your countries have laboratories for air quality. Then we can have environmental emergencies in general, and then I'm reporting this one, which is this lab, which is the border agency, the Agenzia delle Gare in Italy, who owns a laboratory to understand if a given truck maybe transporting fuel, if that fuel was diluted or it's not in the right percentage of like gasoline. And so obviously many agencies use mobile laboratories, and the point is that if you have a mobile laboratory, you can do your analysis on the field. That's obviously the reason for having a mobile lab, to avoid the transportation of the sample from your, from the place where you're doing your inspection or your evaluation to a point where the lab is located. And then at this point, the question is, how do we create laboratories? Here you see the picture, we have a truck, we have a van, we have these cargo containers. So there could be different ways to build up a laboratory. There could be even more options. As you can see here, on the right side, you see our mobile laboratory in Milan with operators inside from fire brigades. But you see a mobile laboratory owned by Belgium, which is not in the form of a shelter, but is in the form of a tent. And so the question is, should you have the same capacity, like the same design requirement and specifications if you pass from metallic iron-made structure to a tent? Are you going to be protected and so on? Let me step back for a second to using this slide to show you a bit. I don't know if you saw it already in other lectures, how is organized the European civil protection. So this map that you see on the screen is reporting the civil protection mechanism. How many of you are from Europe? Okay, so who is not? Where are you guys coming from?
The United Arab Emirates.
Oh, all of you. Okay. So I think we don't arrive to your country. Like this mechanism serve Europe and the Mediterranean area. Like, but in principle, even if your country has some accident and want to ask for help, Europe will come. So the idea is that you see all these icons. It means that France is a big supporter of this system. It means that they have a lot of modules. Okay, every icon is given equipment. They are called modules. In other words, well, let me, of course, describe Italy because it's our country. But so Italy has 6 icons. So it means that the civil protection system of Italy is offering help for 6 different capacities. Okay, this one is the first one is owned by my organization, so Italian Fire Brigades has high capacity pumping. It means whenever you have a flood, someone is coming from Italy, a team with a high capacity pump, and helping to pump water out of the system. Then we have a user, we have an assessment team, we have a task which is a logistic support in support of other teams, and then we have a CBRN. Okay, CBRN detection, which is a team that can come and do the CBRN, like react to CBRN emergencies. Then this red icon is not owned by the fire brigades, it is a medical support from EMT basically team. But so now the point in this slide was to underline the fact that there are The gray icons are the CBRN capacities. Okay, I forgot to circle this one and this one, but the CBRN capacities overall are maybe 8. And then there are 2 mobile labs capacities. So these 2 icons means that overall in the entire European system, this map actually refers to 2021, so it's a little bit old. Just the 2 countries are able to offer help by sending, which are Germany and Belgium. In reality, our CBRN team has the mobile apps that we saw already before, but is not registered as a entity itself. So maybe that hidden somewhere in these icons, there could be other labs, but formally 2 just, it's a very rare, it was a very rare capacity. Given that, and we will show you later on how this is adjusting over time. What's going on? There should be some spoken language is English. What? I don't know. Yeah, spoken language is English. Okay. So we are in the process now in my organization to design new mobile labs. And then I'm just showing some metrics you might think about when you start from scratch with a white paper, the idea of designing a new vehicle. So you have to know what type of mission, you have to know what type of, you want to have a van, you want to have a car, you want to have a big truck, you want to have a tent. What's the expertise of the people working in that lab? Are they all belonging to my organization, or they maybe are mixed, some biologists from another? And then, of course, the scenarios is mandatory. You have to know what are the scenarios. And so talking about CBRN scenarios, I'm using this slide every time that I built up a while ago. We have to remember that let's repeat a little bit when we talk about CBRN scenario, it will be a lot of scenarios. Okay, why is that? Because first of all, you have to understand, given a scenario, if it was still an accident, technological accident, organizational accident, or if it was someone doing it on purpose. So in Italy, we have a distinction, and we say on the left side is civil defense, is civil protection. On the right side, if it is intentional, is civil defense. Okay. Then you have to understand if in which phase you are at. If I'm using a lab, am I in the prevention, preparedness, or I'm in the response phase? Someone is calling me and there was an accident. Someone made it not on purpose, and so we come with the lab and we respond. But when we respond, then we want to know what type of accident is that? Is it chemical, biological, radiological, is nuclear? So let's say in today's lecture is going to be biological. And then, well, actually in this slide it's radiological. And so once you know that it's radiological, you have to ask yourself what type of magnitude is the accident about. So is a very high activity radiological, or is a low activity radiological? But then you also want to know how the radiological source or the biological agent is released, right? And so there are many ways you can disperse in the environment a CBRN agent. So it could be with a fire, throughout an explosion, it's a leakage, it's a spill, it's diffusion, or of course, if we talk about radiation, it could be irradiation. Finally, you have to ask yourself, what's the impact of this accident potentially? So it's going to be on the population or workers, is an environmental issue, is infrastructure, resilient building, or it's just impacting equipments and goods, or maybe you don't really care about in seeing what the target is, and you say, oh, it's going to generate a big economic loss. Okay, so you have always to remember that when we are going to set up a scenario, or when we are picking up our reference scenarios, potentially the combinations are a lot. Okay, that's the message. So, for instance, if I open up the same type of representation for chemicals, in chemicals, I have a lot of sub questions. Once I say, okay, it's a chemical agent, there are many families of threats, if you want. So it could be something which is an explosive, an inflammable liquid, an inflammable gas. It could be a toxic, an oxidant, and so on. Sorry, this is in Italian, I realized. But so it's the same as before, but just to remember that you have to understand what the family is. And we will see that by talking about families, in biology, we have three families. Some of them maybe in the previous lectures did before. And so we categorize the agents in levels. It could be A, B, and C, or one, depending if we use the Anglo-Saxon or our reference. So of safety, we will see that there could be agents that are very, very dangerous, some that are in the middle, and some that are considered low. Okay, so we will see this representation later on, but this still in this classification that we have in Italy, distinguishing civil defense and civil protection. This is a set of reference scenarios that you might want to think about. Here is civil defense, so basically terrorist attacks, taxes, sabotage, and so on. And on the right, we will see like civil protection, which means technological accident, man-made accident, organizational accidents, and so on. We will focus on the biological ones later on, but just to say, remember that when you pick up a set of reference scenarios, could be of this size. So many scenarios. So what are the difference between a laboratory which is in a building, I don't know, a room in a bigger building, or basically a room that is going on weeks? So here, first of all, of course, if it's fixed, you might have walls that protect you as big as you can, potentially. You just build a thick wall. While obviously, here you might have some limitation in space or some limitation in weight. So if you want to have, I don't know, lead protecting you from irradiation, obviously, here you might have all the dimension and the space that you want, but here you cannot go beyond a given thickness of your laboratory. So you have limitation in that sense. In a building, you have the power supply. On a truck, you have to build your own power supply. Maybe you have a gasoline generators, maybe you have you look for a plug to put, look for electricity somewhere, but potentially you don't have the same level of services that you have in a building. This is for electricity, this is for water, this is also for water in and water out, let's say. So then if you think about safety, like your escape routes are limited as well. How many doors can you have in a truck? 1, 2 doors. In a building, potentially you can escape from every direction. And then obviously, by being a smaller space, the number of people that can potentially work inside a mobile laboratory are obviously less than those that can work in a building. Then I don't know, maybe there are some machines like gas chromatographic machines used in chemistry but it needs to have a gas supply to work. Let's see, if you have a building, you might have a huge stock of gas supply, while here you have to have your own charge for your operations. So obviously, sizing and designing a mobile lab has more limitations and constrictions than designing the same lab in a building. And this is also for safety of operators. But then there are some advantages. For instance, you can position this on whatever you want, close to your scenario, apart from it. While obviously in the other case, you can't move your laboratory. And then maybe working in a lab like this requires some extra training to the fact that maybe the procedures change and due to still to the limitation in space and so on. So where do we use a lab? So if we have a very complex scenario, as it could be the case of a CPRN scenario, where do we position a lab, in your opinion? So if this is the red zone, this is the orange, then this is the green. Where do we put this laboratory in this picture? Green. The green. So we put it in the green because we are fire brigades. But potentially, even if the doctrine is changing very recently, military would also potentially put the laboratory in red. And so we had a lot of discussions about this. We will see that even the fire brigades laboratory that we have designed more than 15 years ago, they have a system that is able to switch the internal pressure in positive pressure. Why is that? Why would I change the pressure inside a laboratory to become positive?
To avoid contamination from the exterior.
From the exterior. And so in that case, where would you put this laboratory? In which area?
Whenever you want.
Whatever you want, potentially even in the red zone. So if in the red zone there's a biological cloud, if I have a positive pressure inside, it means that the agents cannot get in. While obviously our laboratories on a daily basis work in the opposite way. So the pressure is, why is that? Why would you keep negative the pressure?
Radiation.
No, it's just because you think in the opposite way. If you are manipulating an agent, the red zone is inside the lab. So if you have a dangerous threats inside the lab, you don't want. But if you are in a green area, it goes out. So here we can open for 1 second the discussion where COVID comes from. If it was true that it was coming from a Chinese lab, one could say maybe they had a problem with the negative pressure. Someone went out from a lab, it means that you couldn't maintain the negative pressure. But then, of course, this is in the hypothesis that is an aerosol. Otherwise, if it's a liquid or a powder, even if it's the powered phase, if you don't have negative pressure, it might go out. Okay, but in general terms, it's correct your answer. So we say in this area with this laboratory. And in fact, here I'm showing a picture from an exercise our CPRN team had in 2023 in Lyon. And so here was some initial, arrangements in our team to decide where we were going to put. In this case, the lab was chemical detection lab, chemical lab. So this is the icon. So where would we put these two icons, and you see that the two icons are not even in this chart. They are not represented here because close to the red zone, we have the contamination, we have sampling and detection, we might have just out the common post, but we don't have laboratories. So laboratories were basically what we call the BOO, and the BOO is the base of operations, which is the classical camp where fabricates sleep and stay, and you put the labs together with the people that are, recovering after the shift. So this is just a graphical representation of the many functions that you might have to deal with in a CBRN mission. And they are basically embedded in that acronym over there, which is detection, sampling, identification, and monitoring. So detection, how come the detection is different from what we do in a laboratory? What do we mean by detection that is not what we do in a lab? Any ideas? What's the difference between?
Detection is the discovering of the presence of the
Yeah.
substance, but we don't know what's the substance. But
Yeah.
in the laboratory, we can do our research to discover what's the substance, what's the risk, what's the danger, and the other.
Yes. Yeah, that could be a definition. So detection is something that you do really on the field. You have your own portable machine. You go and you say, oh, we have radiation. And then, of course, you can come to a certain level of quantification or classification. But if you want like an exact measurement and then categorization or attribution, discovering the real name and surname of a certain substance, then you use what we say in the parentheses up there, the I, that's identification. So laboratories are doing identification or are doing confirmation, maybe legal confirmation of what you saw in the field. So it's very difficult, for instance, that a detection instrument has a legal value. So maybe you say, this is alpha radiation, this is plutonium, this is whatever you want, but then you pick up a sample, you bring it to the lab, and when the lab is saying the same thing, maybe that is a confirmation, but maybe there is also a legal enforcement percent. And so detection is different from identification. Sampling, what do we mean by sampling? Sampling is different from detection, right? What does that mean?
Take a sample.
Yeah, you pick up
Inside the hospital.
some part of something and you bring it to the lab. So for sure, the operation of sampling is something that couples with the idea of having a lab. But it's not given that you have the lab as a mobile lab. Maybe you just have a lab somewhere else in your home city, in your, I don't know, apart from the city. In many cases. And so we understood what is detection, what is sampling, what is identification. Identification is what we do in the labs. What is monitoring instead? What do you think we mean by monitoring?
Maybe live, seeing, air.
Okay, I understood what you mean, even it was a little bit
Would be the development of the expansion of the substance, of the behavior of the danger.
yeah, okay. So let's say that monitoring is for sure something which is conducted in real time to see if something is changing. So you might have a laser pointing a certain point or air sampling, as maybe you were referring. Like you keep going, trying to see if someone new comes up from a given situation. So For instance, our organization has really something that you point in a given direction, maybe some kilometers away from it, you can tell you someone was spreading a chemical agent in there. So your monitor, you don't know. So usually you have stand-up machines, like you put them in a place, you keep them there, and they give you an alarm if something is going on. Okay. So monitoring could be, I want to know if in this room there's too much carbon dioxide. You can put an alarm. So something monitoring continuously the concentration. If the concentration goes above a certain threshold, the alarms goes on. Okay. And so here I just wanted to emphasize the fact that in this framework where many actions are needed, including the decision making, which is the advanced common post, in the framework of detection, sampling, identification, and monitor, labs are doing identification. Okay. Okay. Now we will see some example of designing mobile laboratories. Well, are there any questions up to now? Any curiosity about some figures? Yes.
It's important to put the lab under the wind duration or no?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Even though the idea, well, the idea is to keep the lab very far from the red zone. So usually we are looking at wind, and we say we want to stay upstream. We don't want to have wind going against us, because usually we think about operations. Like if you do detection and sampling, you don't want your operators to do detection and sampling being in the cloud. So potentially, if you know the stream of the wind, you try to stay up the stream. But in the framework we have been seeing before, you saw the map I was showing. There were not even in the map of the labs, so they were so far away from the threat that at that point, for instance, when we decide where to put the base of operation, which means our camp, where we sleep, where we don't look at the wind, we keep a long distance to know that whatever the wind is changing, we are out of the red zone in any case. So then your question becomes sensitive if you, for some reason, decide to put the labs very close to the red zone. So if you're very close to the red zone, then you try not to stay in favor of the wind. Yes, your question? Safety what?
The biosafety with BSC.
That we arrived there. This was as a general info. Then now we arrived to the biosafety levels. We just have been talking in this half an hour about general attributes, metrics of mobile labs. Then we will see an example of a biological laboratory, and then we will start talking about biosafety levels, as you correctly you are mentioning. Okay. Well, I'm just showing you some activities in the biological field. So before going through the design of a mobile lab, the first question is in a general CBRN unit, how much is the weight of the biologic part? So, in your opinion, is it easy for us, for firefighters, to have biological unit versus chemical unit? Let's say so. Is that a rare event? Is that a usual event? But you're a firefighter. What do you think? Biologically, is easy for us or not? Not that easy. So we have that capacity, but it's not that easy. Why? If you are asking a fireman, let's talk about chemicals, he feels more comfortable to deal with chemicals. To deal with biological, So I'm showing these pictures that are very rare events. For instance, this is a training that we have been doing between our Rome, Sicily, the island of Sicily, and Milano. It's a training that was done for the G7 in Taormina. So all the big bosses of the world were there, and we took that occasion to have an exchange. So here we are in a parking place. We were there with a biological capacity in case something is happening, but we used that occasion to have a discussion to see how the machines are working, to see our standards. Okay. This is, I think, as a very unique exercise that was done in biology event in 2016 in Milan. So it was like probably at the level of the Minister of the Interior, someone was asking, let's do an exercise where underground in a subway we have the potential release of a biological agent. I don't have in mind any other exercise that we have done using biological as a potential threat. So it's the only one I remember. I don't know if you know about the others. I think it's the only one probably. Usually we do the chemical, the radiological, but the biological is very. Then this is a picture from the time of 2014, I think. What was the problem in that period? Do you remember? Ebola. So there was the problem that some doctors coming back to Italy from that area, maybe if someone was coming, was feeling bad, we had to follow a procedure. It's not us, it's not the fire brigades that's following the procedure. It's the sanitary system that is using this special, I don't remember in English the name of it, but it's a biocontainment for a patient. And so that thing is something that we just escort. It's like fire brigades follow. If you have to move a patient being inside the biocontainment capsule, we are part of the technical team following the patient. So it's in our procedures, but it's obviously more a sanitary thing than a potential biological threat. So we are there in terms of technical support, but this was true, like that there was a plane landing in Milan, a doctor went to Piacenza, that is not that far from Milan, and after being at home, she felt bad. She had just a flu, but basically we discovered that later on. So we had to act the procedure and to escort that patient to the hospital in Milan and so on. Well, maybe this picture is probably an exercise because it's not that patient. And so this is probably an exercise in Fiumicino, I think. So we did some exercises to be sure that our guys can support this type of operations. So in general terms, biological threats are very rare, but why? Why for you very rare? I'm a fireman. I want to specify again, but for us are very rare.
That's very long term. So for terrorists, it's not useful to use biological attack. Maybe
Okay, but if you think, yeah, so if you think on the bad part, let's say, so the civil defense, using a threat, using a biological weapon is very rare. What is the reference event that we have for that? What's the real scenario that everybody knows about biological attack? The anthrax in 2001. We don't know anything else about that, fortunately, no? And so the real reference is that, and in fact, that's where our unit, for instance, in Milan, but the same could be for Rome, for big cities, we are most trained for. So we are trained for the anthrax threat. Now we'll show later on in some slides the number of false alarms, let's say, some potential scenarios, but then revealed not to be anthrax, but they have a certain way to basically the envelope, some will receive an envelope, and there's something that is like powder inside it. Then in that case, for us, it's a biological scenario with a potential anthrax threat. Okay, so this is some pictures of our unit in Milan. Well, beside the arrangement or the configuration, this capacity, as we said, is in other major cities. Potentially, in our organization, 3 cities have to have the capacity to respond to biological threats. One is Milan, the other one is Rome, and the other one is Palermo. Just because Palermo is in an island, and so probably at that time our chiefs maybe thought that bringing the capacity from to the land to an island, it takes time, and so also Sicily has to own its own capacity. Okay, so of course I'm referring to the what we have in Milan, but there are colleagues that could do the same, showing something similar for Rome. And then obviously, would you send an envelope with anthrax in a very small city? Does it make sense to have an attack in a city that is not symbolic, as it could be Rome or Milan? So that's why basically also our capacity is concentrated there, because doing an attack in a small city is not making so much sense. What's the capital of your country?
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. You do the attack there, or Dubai, but you don't go in a very small town in the middle of nowhere and say, I made an attack. Who cares about the attack? You know what I mean? So you do it because you want to demonstrate that the country cannot react properly, that it's easy to pass some barriers and so on. Okay. I've been to the Agency for Nuclear Regulation in New York, in Abu Dhabi. Yeah. Because that's a friend of mine who is Italian, who was hired at the beginning, like 10 years ago, when the agency was building up. He's still there. Okay. Now maybe we start approaching what the lady was asking, talking about safety in biological laboratories. Then we have to look at both metrics, safety and security. Of course, safety is mandatory if we think that we are talking about biological safety comes first. Then if you want to do an attack to a biological laboratory, it could be also an issue, obviously, but first of all, let's talk about safety. And I'm still taking a little bit of time before introducing what you want me to say, but here I'm showing a list of safety systems. Do these systems make sense to you? But of course, by by default, I started with fire protection systems, but it's not it's just because I come from fire. But it's not the real issue. There could be probably nothing that goes into fire inside the lab, but people might have an electric, burnout or the contamination system. This is safety for operators, but the real point is this system, internal air pressure system and filtration systems. And we discussed it before. So in a biological laboratory, as in any other laboratory, what is basically give you the class of safety of that lab is the capacity to have a very well working system for air pressure. You're able to contain the threat on in a very, very safe and reliable manner or not. In the same, but then this is an electric system. So if it has to work and you're on a mobile lab, it means it always has to run. So you cannot have at some point that you have a shutdown of your systems and the pressure goes down. So obviously, asking for a certain biosafety level also means guaranteeing the fact that you have power during operations, or that you can stop operations before, power goes down, to have redundant systems, to work a little bit on the reliability. So you have to have backups. And then, of course, you have to have standard operating procedures, personal protective equipment, and so on. So, do you know what is this picture is showing? What type of lab is this? What can you see in that picture?
Maybe a biological lab.
No, of course, it's a biological. But, well, one of the operators has a personal protective equipment that is unusual, if you want. I don't know if you can see very well the picture, but basically, this operator has pressure inside of the suite.
Maximum protection.
And it's the maximum protection. You see, basically, maybe you don't see, but air is coming from that pipe.
Why just one?
Huh?
Why just?
Good catch. Why is that one? It's the boss. It's the only one who is supposed to be. Okay, this was not. This was an exercise. Actually, it was the beginning of. I have a picture where later on, all the three operators are wearing the same suit. So, is this situation easy to reach in a mobile lab for you? To have people wearing like the yellow ones? Not easy. Because things about the implications. You have to have some air pressure system connected to that suite. It has to work continuously. So think about the system, the size of the system that is providing three operators to build that situation. So basically, it's not very easy to build up a mobile lab in that way. So that's a picture that is taken from the biosafety level 4, the lab in Milano, the Sacco Hospital. And we have in Italy two labs like this. One is Milan Sacco, and the other one is Spallanzani in Rome. So these are cannot be. Do you have it in your account? Or no? You have probably 3 glass, which is basically not having those suits, but if you want in terms of capacity, is actually is the same thing. In the reality, is the same. Why are you biologists? Yes. working some often. No. Okay.
We have background.
Okay. Okay, then safety systems and then security systems. Then it cannot be that if you maintain air pressure, someone can come and open the door like this from outside. That's clear. Even if you don't have an attack to your biological lab, opening the door should be something that needs a confirmation. I ring, I see you, I open the door. Obviously, the pressure is maintained by two doors, so that it's not just opening a door because it puts off your system. But then maybe you have to think about the data protection system. Your data are important. Then you have to think about the general terms in sustainability. How long could be the permanence of the people inside the lab? Yeah, then you have to think also if for some reason, as I said, the wind moves or something change in the scenario, maybe not the wind, but something relevant, and then could I move my lab somewhere else? And then also be sure that, oh, okay, I do a safe and secure transport if I move to another area. Okay, I would say really time of 5 minutes. We have a break between this hour and the next one, but we're going to stand together. Time of a cigarette or use of the restroom, and we find ourselves back here. Okay? So you guys come up for a week, it's going to be for a weekend.
Sì, ogni tanto si ripete che il gioco si fa la parte il nostro però è fatto per tutte e tre però per fatto lo spazio di fine da lavoro cioè io ho finito prima tra il verde e il tre punti bisogna mangiare per la parola. Io non lo so.
L'unico riuscito, no, non serve. Quindi la tina come chi è il poco
Il mio dopo, il mio, l'altro non è il mio. Per Giacomo calcio di ieri.
che arrivava la linea, no?
Sì,
Sta andando. E invece prima che c'era Luigi? No.
Bianchi,
No.
che vuoi cosa vuoi?
Vabbè. Cancellieri c'è, insomma,
Sì, sì, sì. È presente.
presente, personaggio. Quelli ok, abbiamo quelli ok e quelli non ok, quelli ok, sì, sì, penso di sì. Appena arrivato?
Da pochi mesi,
Mm.
però si sente che comunque la persona ferma.
Sì, sì. Vabbè, quindi i famosi 5 minuti sono stati presi.
Io ho un po' di difficoltà con l'inglese.
Ce n'erano varie persone che sono venute qua, anche le una volta c'erano 40 minuti che mi facevano un bel master. No, senza detto, l'inglese sì,
Sì.
ha fatto tutto il corso, secondo me, a capire 20 anni di quello che
E poi infatti sono castigato a capo perché io ricordo vocabolario ogni tanto, però mi perdo qualche parola.
se ti interessa il campo, sapere l'inglese, sono di là del master a tornato, poi
Stavo già facendo le altre, quindi allora io straniamo così,
vabbè, lo facciamo spesso.
mi sono dato 20 anni fa di tecnologia,
Ah,
stai studiando, sono finito per un po'.